Yankee Stadium yesterday, where the first pitch temperature was 43 degrees. And then, Gary, I flipped on the Dodgers-Giants game from Chavez Ravine last night at 8 o'clock. What was you know what the game time temperature was there? It was 85 degrees. It was twice as warm in Los Angeles yesterday as it was in New York. Isn't that something?
Yeah, we always do. Well, we deal with it this time of year. You know, there was a time when Major League Baseball started its season, late April, sometimes, even later than that. But with the schedules being what they are, I have to jam in so many games and playoffs and all that.
Well, what it is they don't play doubleheaders anymore.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
Yeah. So because they need the revenue from every gate.
Yes.
That's why you sometimes see these day-night doubleheaders where you'll have two games and two separate admissions on the same day. But it used to be very common. You maybe have 8 or 10 regularly scheduled doubleheaders over the course of the season, and so that's an extra week, 10 days tacked onto the season. And so
you think about it.
They mentioned yesterday that the Tigers last opened a season in New York in 1966, and I believe the date of that game was April 12th. So here they are, it's essentially 2 weeks earlier opening the season.
Yeah.
And what was funny was they showed a close-up of the bases, and the ballparks were all bedecked in opening day, stuff. Not only the bunting, but they have special paintings along the baseline that says opening week on them, and the bases themselves said opening week April 2011. And I was watching the Yes broadcast, the Yankees broadcast, and the announcers pointed out that the base was therefore incorrect because, of course, yesterday was still March.
Yes, that's a good point. Now, I wonder who got that mixed up.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, well.
It was only wrong for a day, I suppose.
You know what? Maybe an April Fool's gag a day early.
There we go.
Maybe. Hey, no April Fools messing around here, this business with radiation, making it from Japan.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you what.
Here.
The International Atomic Energy Agency, I believe it was yesterday, might have been the day before, given the time difference, but they said that that people within 25 miles of that facility should be evacuated.
Yeah, cleared out completely.
Wow.
But then where do they go?
Exactly.
And then once they leave, there's no coming back because they're saying a lot of those homes. I mean, it's so ravaged.
Right.
You just can't go back. In other words, it's history. You can't. It's contaminated forever.
Well, and that's the thing. I was reading an item this morning, a troubling note. I believe it was on CNN.com, saying that there are areas that have been devastated by the tsunami where they can't, it's no longer rescue workers, but they can't send personnel in to recover the bodies because of the radiation problem.
Yeah, it's just terrible. And now the situation with this stuff drifting over here, we have. Yeah. This has been reported a lot this week. We have another report this morning from the State Department of Environmental Quality here, again confirming trace amounts of radiation from the Japanese nuclear power plant have been recorded in the state. This continues, but officials do note here the levels are of no threat to us and are far below levels of iodine that we're exposed to every day. The Department of Community Health adds the levels are, quoting here, thousands of times less than what would require people to take any action to protect themselves. But the very fact that any of this stuff is making it here is obviously troubling.
And it's somewhat amazing because we're talking about 6,000 miles away that this material is traveling.
I know. That's the thing when you think about it. But, it gets up in the rain clouds and it drifts. All right, this update is service of our friends at American Metal Roofs. Check them out. This is really something. They have some extraordinary pictures of these beautiful, guaranteed American Metal Roofs on their terrific website. Learn more, AmericanMetalRoofs.com. This update also a service of AARP, a membership group leading positive change and delivering value to people age 50 and over through information, advocacy, and service.
We're talking about Japan, and two notes on that. I mentioned I was watching the Dodgers-Giants game last night on ESPN, and Bobby Valentine was one of the commentators, the former Major League manager, who also managed for several years in Japan, and therefore has a lot of friends over there in Japan, and has a good handle, not firsthand because he's not there, but by being in contact with people in Japan. And he was talking about 400,000 people still, and it's 3 weeks to the day today since the tsunami hit. 400,000 people are without homes. You've got infrastructure that's just been wiped out. The entire country is extremely worried. And he also said that the Japanese Major League Baseball season, which was to have begun a couple of weeks ago, has not yet started. which is sort of an aside, but they are taking collections at all major league parks this year on behalf of UNICEF to aid victims of the disaster in Japan, and Major League Baseball itself has contributed $500,000 to that effort. So I thought that was nice. The other note: do you know what today also is in addition to April Fool's Day?
No.
It's Cherry Blossom Day.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, and this the cherry blossoms are in full bloom in Washington, D.C., and the cherry blossoms, as I'm sure you know, were a gift to the United States from the Japanese government back in the 1920s. And they are. I took the family last year. We went. It was Easter weekend, and we went. And it just happened to be cherry blossom time when we were there last year. And the funny thing is that it seemed to me they were in full bloom for about 30 minutes. They said that last year was, for whatever reason, one of the shortest cherry blossom seasons on record. They were actually in full bloom for only a day. And you'd see an occasional tree still in bloom, and they're just gorgeous. But once the bloom comes off, they're like a dull pink, if you will. And they were in bloom for one day last year. They said the peak blooming period for the cherry blossoms this year. Well, today's the last day. It was March 29th until April the 1st. But if you get a chance to get there while they're in full bloom, I can tell you it's worth the trip. The only thing that really struck us was they have a big festival. Literal, like fair, if you will. And it took us by car to go from the Lincoln Memorial to the U.S. Capitol. It took us about an hour and 45 minutes because of the traffic. So I would not advise trying to drive. We didn't know, but I would not advise trying to drive around when the Cherry Festival is going on.
I wonder why the season was so short this year. They say why?
No,
weather?
they did not. So
I imagine it's kind of has something to do with the weather.
It has to. But again, last year they said it lasted. They were in full bloom for only one day, which was noteworthy in its shortness.
It is extraordinary, though. In one day, it all happened. I mean, just sort of like a burst.
Yeah, and apparently it used to be they would stay in bloom for a week or 10 days or even 2 weeks. And the other thing that was odd is the second or third day we're there, and I think it was the second day. It was early April, and in fact, it was. We were there. It was Easter Sunday when we were there. The day after Easter in Washington, you'd have to go back and look at a calendar to see the exact date. It went up to 88 degrees. I mean, it was remarkable. Nobody was prepared for it, and that may have had something to do with the short season, and perhaps this year with the storms hitting the Northeast. And I don't know how close Washington. They were talking about Maryland getting snow. I don't know how close Washington is to that, but perhaps that has something to do with it as well.
We've got a story here, and this is really encouraging. Math and reading scores jumped last year in those all-important MEP tests statewide for all grades for the first time since 2005. The Michigan Department of Education also notes the achievement gaps between groups of students has also narrowed by quite a bit. In the fall of 2010, 95% of Michigan third graders attained basic proficiency in math, while 92% of fourth graders, 85% of sixth and seventh graders, and nearly 80% of fifth and eighth graders also attained that all-important basic proficiency. So good news there.
They say the test is going to become more difficult next year. And what struck me is that the math scores, the kids were actually doing better in math than they were in reading. And I don't know about you, but I always found math to be a lot more difficult than reading.
Yeah, I could read all day long, but give me a math problem. And Rich, you and I, we were in school at a time where we didn't have handy access to these computer gadgets, even handheld calculators. Sure. We couldn't use those in math class when I was in school. So that's the way it was. One last note here. Investors are fixing their attention today on the stock market, and for good reason, because the Labor Department is out today with the March unemployment report, and the current unemployment rate is now at 8.9%, but in real numbers, it's actually closer to 14% because the government, state and federal, no longer counts those who've given up looking altogether. So to a large degree, how those employment stats will shake out, Rich, will be a good gauge how things will fare on Wall Street today and probably into next week as well.
All right, Gary, we'll look for that. Thanks very much. Always nice to chat with you.
All righty, Rich. Thank you.
Gary Austin in the newsroom. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick Shields, and Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields continues in just a moment. And it is Firekeepers Friday as we join you from the American Metal Roofs studio. My name is Rich Kincaid, in today for Michael Patrick, who will join us in the third hour of this morning as he is at the National Golf Correspondents annual outing. So we'll talk to him about, the Masters coming up next week. Right now we want to turn our attention to politics, specifically the state Democratic Party and their chairman, Mark Brewer, who joined us on the other end of our line. Mark, I noticed you have a YouTube video out as you review the first 3 months of the Rick Snyder administration, and you take a dim view.
Yeah, and I think rightly so, Rich. You know, Snyder promised to make job creation his top priority during the campaign last year, but he has yet to sign a single piece of legislation or take a single action which will create jobs. As a matter of fact, a number of things that he has done will actually hurt workers here in Michigan. The elimination of item pricing will cost us jobs. Just this past week, he signed legislation reducing the amount of unemployment benefits that people in Michigan can get. We're now the worst state in the country.
20 weeks.
The number of unemployment benefits that we provide.
What did they call that bill? It had one of those names that actually don't mean what you think it means, like the Clean Air Act that George W. Bush passed. They called it the, Saving Unemployment from Michigan Act or something, when in point of fact what it was doing was cutting unemployment benefits from 26 weeks to 20 weeks. Yeah,
I mean, again, people come up with all kinds of creative names, but if you look at the facts over the last 3 months with what he's done, I mean, even looking at his budget, cutting public education, cutting revenue sharing. We've got 150 school districts in this state on the verge of bankruptcy, and now he proposes to cut funding for public education by hundreds of millions of dollars, and much of that money then will be put toward this huge tax cut for big corporations, insurance companies, and CEOs. And even the governor and his top people will not guarantee that that huge tax cut will create jobs. As a matter of fact, the record in other parts of the country for such tax cuts is that they don't work. Ohio tried that a few years ago. They gave a $1 billion tax cut to big corporations in Ohio, and it didn't create a single job. The economy continued to decline. So all this money is being pushed that direction. Taxes are being raised on seniors. Taxes are being raised on low-wage workers. All in this huge gamble, which is not going to pay off.
To find the video, I simply went to YouTube and searched for Michigan Democrats, and it was the first thing that came up. I didn't realize that 21 state police posts were being closed.
Yes, that was announced within the last couple of weeks as well. Not only closing 21 posts, which is a third of the posts in the state, but a number of them are going to be downgraded, so that while the state police will still work there, the public won't be able to get any services out of that post. If you add those posts in, half the posts in the state are either going to be closed or, like I said, be downgraded in terms of the public not being able to have access to the state police officers in that building. He talked about none of this during the campaign. He didn't campaign on raising people's taxes, cutting public education, and all these other things. And there's a lot of folks out there, Republicans, independents, a lot of folks feeling very misled by what's been going on the first 3 months.
That may be the big issue right there, is the when they imposed the tax on pensions, because one thing about seniors we know is they vote.
Yeah, they certainly do. I mean, between the Republican attacks on Social Security and Medicare in Washington, and now the Republican attacks led by Governor Snyder here on pensions, I think seniors are really seeing who's on their side when it comes to these kind of things. And again, all this stuff, Rich, violates the governor's promises of, he said, look, we're going to have equal sacrifice. We're not going to leave anybody behind. And all of these actions have violated those principles. People are being left behind in this state, the unemployed, the poor, and there's not equal sacrifice. A lot of folks are going to get tax cut from this governor while he raises the taxes for most of the rest of us.
The one proposal I saw mentioned this week was an idea being floated about that if a teachers' union goes on strike, everybody in that union gets fired. I guess you could make the case, so they're not striking by teachers is illegal, so that's all well and good. But the question that popped into my mind is who teaches the kids in that case?
Yeah, that's right. And plus, you've got to be fair to other folks as well. But again, I think we're seeing over and over and over again, frankly, a lot of overreaching, a lot of extremism on the part of Governor Snyder and the legislative Republicans. They don't feel that there's any restraint on them, and they just feel that they don't have to answer to anybody. Well, in fact, they're going to have to answer to the voters in 2012, if not before, for what they're failing to accomplish so far.
What do you mean, if not before?
Well, I think there are ways that folks can take matters into their own hands. You've seen the protests at the state capitol, and I think you're going to continue to see those kinds of protests and pushback. I've heard of town hall meetings around the state where a lot of these Republican legislators are being asked some very tough questions about what they're doing and why.
Do you foresee a recall effort? Let's just cut to the chase then.
Well, I know there are recall efforts being talked about out there. We haven't taken a position on those recall efforts. We continue to want to work with the governor. For example, his budget. If he'd be willing to sit down with Democrats and talk about a truly bipartisan budget that shared the sacrifice, we'd be willing to work with him on that. So we continue to extend our hand, but so far it's been an all-Republican show, and you can see what's happened in the first 3 months.
Did you see the graphs in the Free Press, I'm thinking it was maybe 2 weeks ago, where they broke down Governor Snyder's proposed tax, readjustment, for want of a better word, for people making $15,000 a year with the elimination of the Earned Income Tax Credit? Their taxes essentially are going to go up about $1,000 a year. Someone making $215,000 a year would see a tax increase of about $700.
Yeah, and that's, again, part of the unfairness here. And, again, it's not just unfair to seniors. You're going to see their taxes go up to low-wage workers. We're going to see their taxes go up. When those taxes go up, that's less money that those folks are going to spend. When they spend less money, that's going to have an economic impact in this state. Low-wage workers spend that money immediately. They got to put bread on the table. They got to pay their rent, their mortgage, whatever the case may be, and that goes into the community and supports jobs. So that's going to have a negative economic impact in this state. It's going to cost us even more jobs.
Okay. Mark Brewer, the chairman of the Michigan State Democratic Party. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, Mark, as we say, Mark Brewer joining us on the phone. Later on this morning, Debbie Stabenow, one of our U.S. senators. We have both our U.S. senators on this morning, Debbie Stabenow in the next hour, and in the final hour of the program this morning, Carl Levin will join us as well. Let's shift gears, talk about the opener yesterday. The baseball season got underway. 5 games across Major League Baseball, including the Yankees loss. The Tigers loss to the Yankees, 6-3 the final score at Yankee Stadium yesterday. It was, as billed, a great pitching matchup between two of the finest in the game. CC Sabathia and Justin Verlander matching each other nearly pitch for pitch. Each went 6 innings yesterday. Verlander gave up 3 hits. Sabathia gave up 6. Sabathia struck out 7. Verlander struck out 8. But the big difference was the fact that Justin Verlander got a pitch up to Mark Teixeira, and Teixeira hit it out of the ballpark, a 3-run home run, and that really was the story of the ballgame, as the Yankees at that point took a 3-1 lead. The Tigers came back and with single runs in 4th and 5th, tied it at 3. But then Verlander, his day was done at the end of 6. But as we mentioned, both the starters went 6 innings yesterday. Verlander threw 118 pitches. He was out. And Phil Koch, who's supposed to be the Tigers' 5th starter this year, but is coming out of the bullpen with the off days that occur early in the season, came on in relief of Verlander. And in a bit of a curiosity, the first man he faced was the player that he was traded for, Curtis Granderson, the former Tigers center fielder. So Koch, facing his first hitter of the year, gives up a home run to Granderson. That was the game-winning RBI. The Yankees went on to defeat the Tigers 6-3. Granderson made a great catch in the outfield in the first inning. He made a great catch in the outfield in the 9th inning. And then, of course, he had the home run which won the ball game for the Yankees in the 7th inning. All of this after Granderson came close to not even appearing in the game yesterday. He suffered a strained oblique muscle in spring training. He actually played in a minor league game the day before opening day down in Florida and flew in time for the game yesterday. And somebody asked Yankees manager Joe Girardi after the game if Granderson looked healthy to him.
Yes, he did. There was obviously questions on Tuesday how it was going to turn out, but he looked great today. Outstanding defense, big home run in the bottom of the 7th. I mean, he has been a different player for us the last 3 months of last year, including the playoffs, and he looks great.
Boy, he did. He certainly did yesterday. Also looking great was that Yankee bullpen. I'll tell you what New York's game plan is going to be this year. Shorten the ball game. They got to their bullpen in the 7th inning. They used Joba Chamberlain in the 7th, Rafael Soriano in the 8th, and Rivera in the 9th inning last year. Mariano Rivera, excuse me. He's only the best relief pitcher in the history of baseball. And it was 9 up and 9 down for the Tigers yesterday against that Yankee bullpen. And here's their manager, Girardi, on that.
We talked about our bullpen could play a huge role for us this year, and it did today. You get 3 scoreless innings out of them, starting with Joba Soriano and Rivera. And we're going to need that.
And they got it yesterday. 2 teams are off today. They will resume their weekend opening series tomorrow afternoon at Yankee Stadium. The other opening day finals yesterday, Atlanta over Washington, 2-0. Justin Hayward hit a home run, second straight opening day where he's hit a dinger. Cincinnati was trailing Milwaukee 6-3 in the bottom of the 9th inning yesterday, and they pulled out a 7-6 victory. They got a 2-out, 3-run home run to get the job done in that one. Los Angeles over Kansas City 4-2. San Diego beat St. Louis 5-3. Former Tiger Cameron Maybin tied the game with 2 outs in the 9th inning and then had the game-winning hit in the 11th inning in that victory. And the LA Dodgers, Donnie Mattingly gets his first win as manager as the Dodgers knock off San Francisco 2-1. As we mentioned, it was 85 degrees in Los Angeles yesterday, 43 degrees when the game started yesterday at Yankee Stadium. So that gets us all caught up on yesterday's opening day activities. Of course, tomorrow we've got the NCAA basketball tournament, the 2 national semifinal games. First tip-off at 6:09, VCU and Butler, and then the second game at 8:49, Kentucky against Connecticut. We're going to take a break and be back with more on Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields, coming to you live from the American Metal Roofs studio on Firekeepers Friday. And Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick this morning. Jordan McCarlton in studio with us. Amanda K. Wall on her way to the airport as they inaugurate service today from Washington, D.C. to Lansing and vice versa. Of course, we're talking about the Tigers before we went to the last break as we joined you live from the American Metal Roofs studio on this Firekeepers Friday. The Vancouver, in hockey, just to shift gears a little bit, the Vancouver Canucks, a notable development last night, they clinched the President's Trophy, best record in the National Hockey League for the first time in the 40-year history of that franchise. Vancouver beat Los Angeles by a score of 3-1 last night to cinch it. They now have 113 points on the year. Vancouver's the only team in the Western Conference to have clinched a playoff spot at this point, which surprises me a bit this late in the season. The Red Wings haven't clinched a playoff spot. I mean, you think they're going to get in there, although it was a little troublesome night before last. I was at that 10-3 loss to the St. Louis Blues. I live blog while the games are going on. You can check that out at Everybody Wants to Read My blog. And I mentioned early in the second period, I wrote, the Red Wings are running around in their own zone like I haven't seen maybe in 20 years. And then it turns out when St. Louis was ahead 8-3 at the end of the second period, it was the first time since 1986 that the Wings had allowed 8 goals in 2 periods. So it wasn't 20 years since they've been running around like that. It was 25. And I later learned that the 8 goals the Wings surrendered were the most ever in franchise history in a home game. 8 goals in 2 periods, as St. Louis put on them. And, of course, the Wings lost 10-3 and just looked awful. And that worries you with, Detroit's got half a dozen games to go in the regular season. They sit with 98 points. San Jose has passed them and moved into second place in the Western Conference. I don't think the Wings are too concerned about that, but they do want to win that Central Division and have home ice advantage at least in the first round of the playoffs. And that usually translates into the second round as well. But San Jose passed them for second place in the conference. As you know, top 8 teams in the conference make it in. Dallas would appear to be the only team that has a chance still to catch Detroit. They've got 6 games to go. They have 87 points, so they can max out at 99. And therefore, they win all their games. Detroit loses all their games. Dallas would actually pass Detroit and make the playoffs and knock them out. That's why the Wings have not yet clinched. But at any rate, the Wings are in Nashville tomorrow for a game against the Predators. Your hockey finals last night, Toronto over Boston, 4-3 in a shootout. Maple Leafs are still 5 points out of a playoff spot. They've got 4 to play. I don't think they're going to make it. The Islanders beat the Rangers 6-2. The Rangers had been red hot. Atlanta over Philadelphia 1-0. Washington beat Columbus in overtime 4-3. Tampa Bay over Pittsburgh 2-1. Ottawa took Florida 4-1. Minnesota beat Edmonton 4-2. Nashville over Columbus 3-2, and it was San Jose helping the Wings out by blanking Dallas last night 6-0. So that's the latest from the National Hockey League. We're joined right now by Jamie Westenbarger of Forest Hills Financial. Jamie is a registered principal of Invest Financial and the president of Forest Hills Financial, Inc. Invest is not affiliated with Forest Hills Financial, and the opinions expressed are those of Jamie and not necessarily those of Invest. Jamie, good morning. Unemployment numbers out this morning. Is that the big economic news today?
Hey, good morning, Rich. Yeah, obviously that's something that that everyone's keeping an eye on with what's the readjustment of the unemployment numbers yesterday. So we'll be looking at hiring numbers to see if companies are indeed continuing to hire more people, as Bloomberg reported is most likely the case yesterday with a survey of employers they took. You also have, of course, banking news on the forefront with what's taking place in Ireland and the release of the Fed numbers of all the foreign banks that were tapping this Federal Reserve window that we were not allowed to know about because it would hurt them, supposedly.
Yeah, it's the whole Fed deal's a little bit strange, isn't it? It's a public institution, and yet it's not. They won't tell us who's getting their money and how much of it they're getting.
Well, and I think when it was originally happening, everyone, there was some carping about it, but for the most part, everyone felt okay about it because you could understand that if a large U.S. institution took $300 billion, it might make their the people that have their money in their savings accounts a little nervous. But then when it comes out that the majority of the banks that were taking the money were foreign, I think that might twist that a little bit. So this comes on the news that in another month, of course, the Fed will start having public discussions about what they discuss, and they're going to have a press conference every quarter, which is just kind of new information for them to be doing. So that's kind of in the news, and the stock market's definitely interested in what's going on with the Bank of Ireland and what's happening over there as we see another European bank need some kind of rescuing, as they all seem to have needed here recently.
Just quickly here in 30 seconds or so, gasoline prices seem to be of primary concern to everybody, and it's easy to see why with prices at like $3.65, $3.69 a gallon now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there's just so many things going on at the same time. You have strong data coming out of China as far as their manufacturing, which of course increases the demand for oil. We still have this conflict going on in Libya. There's still some general unrest over in the Middle East, so that's going to, of course, affect oil, which ultimately affects gas.
Okay, Jamie, thanks for joining us. Always good to chat with you.
Thanks, Rich.
Jamie Westenbarger of Forest Hills Financial. Coming up on the program, hey, we've got some free time. So we'll kill some free time in the next segment. Amanda Wall is going to join us at the top. Out of the airport, you're listening to Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields. And Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this Friday morning. It's a Firekeepers Friday as we join you from the American Metal Roofs studio. Rich Kincaid, Jordan McCarlton in studio with us also. My daughter was telling me yesterday there are a lot of Indian students that go to her high school. Do you know what the biggest sporting event going on in the world is right now?
Cricket World Cup?
Yeah, and she says that's all they're talking about. And she was asking me questions about cricket, and I don't know.
I was lucky enough to live in New Zealand for a year. Huge cricket sport there.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the deal? They hit a ball with a paddle. That's about all I know.
It's actually pretty cool. Where baseball's a lot about the pitching and not scoring,
yes.
Cricket's all about scoring runs. So
but there's only two bases. You're going to score a lot, aren't you?
Well, it's two guys running back and forth between that base, so it's actually not a whole lot different. It's pretty cool. Honestly, if you got into it as a baseball fan, I think you would like it.
Okay. So, anyways. So you can hit like 30 dingers in a game.
Yeah, I mean, the best, the real big thing in sports is to get a century, which is to get 100 runs in a bat, basically.
Oh, that's just too much.
It's
How long do games last?
Well, the longest ones are the ones that go 5 days. It's a 5-day international.
No, for a single game?
It's a single game. That's a
how
single
many,
match.
How many hours do you play a day?
Usually, I think it's 6 to 8 hours.
Oh my God!
But I mean,
and you would have to cover that in the press box.
You'll love this,
Rich. Serious?
There's a tea time in between, so both teams will sit down across from each other and have tea.
Well, how nice!
In between.
Holy, I have a hard time with a baseball game that goes 3:45, and I'm going to sit there for an 8-hour-long cricket match. And it's the first of 5 days of such cricket match watching?
It's a commitment.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, anyways, that's the big thing going on in sports. There were only 2 NBA games last night. Is this true?
Yeah,
it is.
Right.
Boston beat San Antonio 107-97, and the Lakers beat Dallas 110-82 in a game which featured 5 ejections. All right. Testimony continues in the perjury trial of Barry Bonds in San Francisco yesterday. Tears streaming from her eyes, says the story on ESPN.com. Barry Bonds' former personal shopper became the first and only one of the government's 23 witnesses at his federal trial to say that she saw the all-time home run leader getting an injection from his trainer. Kathy Hoskins was the first eyewitness to testify that Bonds' personal trainer, Greg Anderson, who was later convicted of dealing in steroids, injected the slugger. She said yesterday that the scene unfolded at Bonds' well-appointed Bay Area home in 2002. As part of her job, she packed the baseball star's clothes for road trips. It must be nice to be a baseball star. Somebody's packing your suitcase. Anderson said she came into the bedroom. As Anderson came into the bedroom, Hoskins, the witness, said, as she was filling a suitcase. And she said, quote, Barry was like, let's do it right here, using a tissue to repeatedly dab at her eyes and brow. This is Katie, said Bonds. That's my girl. She ain't going to say nothing to nobody, she quoted Bonds as saying. So Greg shot him in the belly button. It was a regular, normal-sized syringe, she said. Hoskins said she didn't ask about the injection, but Bonds volunteered that it was, quote, a little something for when I go on the road. You can't detect it, you can't catch it. So one witness has said that Bonds indeed injected himself with the steroids. So I saw a documentary, Showtime or HBO, one of them, that was essentially pro-steroids. It was this kid who grew up with dreams of becoming a professional wrestler, and he never used. But his brothers did, and his brothers actually made it as pro wrestlers. And it followed a number of people that have been taking steroids for 10, 15, 20 years and are showing no adverse effects from so doing. Everybody points to Lyle Alzado, but it said in terms of deaths, it listed a variety of, well, for example, alcohol would be, number one on the list. But it listed, just a tremendous amount of drugs and chemicals, and steroids came in terms of the death rate at like 105. So it just struck me that it was interesting because as soon as you hear steroids, everybody goes, they're just terrible for you. And this seemed to be making the case that, no, that's not true. But the problem that I have with steroids is that it was cheating at the time that these players were taking them. Well, actually, technically, it wasn't cheating because it wasn't in the agreement, but what they were doing was taking these drugs so that they could hit, well, in Bond's case, 70 home runs a season, in McGuire's case, 70 home runs a season. So morally, it was cheating, even though it wasn't technically against the rules. But I just thought it was interesting that somebody was out there with a documentary. I wish I could remember the name of it, but I'm sure you can just Google it. And it said steroids not so bad. That was news to me.
It is interesting to get a second perspective on it. I'm not sure we want to encourage anyone else to use steroids, but it is interesting that something that's prescribed by doctors at times to kind of help people get their strength up. So
right.
There must be some good effects to it.
Yeah. So at any rate, it was he was talking to these guys, old guys. Well, when I say old, I mean my age, but in their 60s that had been in pro wrestling or weightlifting, for their entire lives and had been taking the stuff for 20 years, and they just they said, hey, I haven't had any problems with it whatsoever. I did not expect that take on it. So at any rate, but the problem with Bonds in the federal trial, He's on trial for perjury for having lied to federal investigators. Whether or not the government makes its case, a lot of people are saying they're not going to. We will find out. All right, first hour of the program is out of the way. We will take a break. We have a great second hour coming up for you. Amanda K. Wall from the airport and U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, among others. It's the Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields. We're joining you on Firekeepers Friday from the American Metal Roofs studio. And good morning, Michigan. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this April Fool's Day. We had our joke earlier where we talked about Michigan State winning the NCAA basketball tournament last night in double overtime against Ohio State, so we don't have to go through that again. But apparently it actually did catch some people by surprise who didn't realize, which is always the way you get caught on April Fool's Day. You don't realize it's April 1st, but boy, it's here already. And a quarter of the year has gone by. Well, on this April Fool's Day, no fooling, but the big news out at the Capital Region Airport, where today service between Lansing and Washington, D.C. is being inaugurated. It is now a reality, and Amanda K. Wall is at the airport for us this morning. Amanda, what's the scene like there?
Good morning, Rich.
Hi.
It is very busy down here. There are a lot of cars pulling in. Everybody's getting really excited about the new flight that you can take from Lansing to Washington, D.C.
And with the big advantage of the new services, it's going to make it certainly a lot easier to get from our capital to the nation's capital.
It will be a lot easier. The first flight will depart from Lansing at 9 a.m., and it's going to arrive into Washington at 10:30 a.m. So it'll arrive about an hour and 25 minutes earlier than the original flight would have.
There you go. Somebody helped make this happen, our own U.S. Senator from the mid-Michigan area, Debbie Stabenow. She's also on the line with us. Good morning, Senator. Yes, Senator Stabenow?
Yes, good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is a big day for you.
It's a very exciting, it's been a wonderful group effort in the community to get this done, and I was very pleased to lead this effort in D.C. and with the Chamber and with MSU and the airport and everyone working together. We were able to get this done. There was only one new slot, as they call it, that opened up at the Washington, D.C. airport, and there was a lot of competition across the country, but the community put together a wonderful proposal, and I was pleased to push that through, and I'm looking forward. I'm taking the first flight today back home, so that flight leaves at 11 a.m., and I'm going to be able to fly directly to Lansing, which I'm thrilled about.
Absolutely. I mean, because you've been making the trip for years and years now. How much easier will this make it for you?
Oh, it'll be so much easier. I do come home every Friday usually and come back on Monday because I really view this as a long-distance commute to work. But, it's a 3-hour trip normally for me. So to be able to make it an hour, 15 minutes, an hour and a half is really wonderful. And it's going to be so much better for folks at MSU who are doing such great work, research work back and forth, working with folks in D.C., as well as really adding to the importance of our airport. We've been working to create what's called Port Lansing. We have now the ability to bring in international goods and have a customs operation there. We have an international center that, in terms of trade, international trade center that we have been working on, and we're really building up the importance of the capital area airport, and it should be. It's the capital city. We're in the middle of the state. We have the state capital. We have MSU. We have an array of businesses that are important. And so building up the ability for the airport and for our businesses to trade internationally, to be able to get to D.C. back and forth in a day, this is important for us.
Will this create jobs, and if so, what sorts of jobs?
Well, it will continue to create a number of different kinds of jobs in terms of building up jobs related to the airport. I think it makes us more attractive as a business location because of those direct flights and the connections with the state capital. Again, with MSU, we have an incredibly important research institution, my alma mater, which I'm very proud of, but there's a lot of work going on all of the time, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's the rare isotope operation, what we call the FRIB, whether it's medical research. I mean, we have all kinds of things happening at MSU, partnering with federal agencies, Department of Energy and so on, the ability to be able to move back and forth quickly is going to help us, I think, bring in more dollars and more jobs.
You know, I was driving around the MSU campus, sort of, a homecoming for myself as well,
Right.
a week or two ago. It's just amazing the construction that's going on over there.
It is amazing. And, having a research university in our backyard is so important. It's not only important for students like you and I to have opportunities to go to college, but the jobs that come in with that, the spin-off because of important research that's being done. I chair the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee now, and MSU is the first land-grant university, is a major source of expertise nationally around food safety, around agricultural issues, all kinds of research to help our farmers to be able to do the best job they can and be more productive and so on and efficient. Michigan State is really looked to as a star as we look at those areas of research. So I see it every day. I had Dr. Bruce Dale from Michigan State before my committee this week talking about advanced biofuels research, and he's really a national leader at MSU in what's being done in the next step of ethanol, what's called cellulosic ethanol, to get us off of foreign oil. So again, having the ability to step on a plane and, in less than an hour and a half get off in D.C. and go back and forth in a day is, I think, going to be a real advantage for us.
Senator, you mentioned agriculture, you mentioned things like food safety, you mentioned research into biofuels. The House, of course, yesterday passed a bill calling for $33 billion in cuts. How will those cuts, if they're enacted, and everybody says they're not going to be because the Senate won't go along, but what kind of impact would those cuts have?
Well, first of all, we all know we've got to do a reset in terms of cutting back on non-essential things because just as families are having to tighten their belts, the federal government does as well, and we have to set priorities. The problem is when you're cutting in these areas related, for instance, to agricultural research, there have been major cuts back in the ability for Michigan State to be able to do its work to help farmers, whether it's emerald ash borer killing our trees, or something called bovine TB, which is a big issue, or other kinds of things related to our apple growers or blueberry growers and so on. It relates to our ability to have production and jobs. I mean, we're focusing on ag research, just like health research, is really about our future, solving problems, being able to make sure that we've got a safe food supply, making sure as we look at, solving diseases and so on. And it's the same thing with health research. There's been, coming out of the House, major cutbacks in health research, cancer research, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, things that I think, I know certainly have touched my family, and I think all of us would say, wait a minute, I think those are important priorities. That's not what we meant when we said tighten your belt. Get rid of inefficiencies and cut back on the things that aren't important. But things that are life-saving, things that create jobs, we've got to make sure that we're setting the right choices and priorities.
Senator, House Speaker Boehner said yesterday that if the Senate does not go along with the cuts in 1 week's time, they will assume that the law simply takes effect. That's not quite how I read the Constitution. How do you react to that statement?
Well, first of all, there's been agreement on the amount, that needs to be cut back, which is significant. The question is the priorities. And again, I would argue that anything related to jobs, healthcare research, education should not be the place that we're cutting back on as we look to the future to compete in the global economy. That's not what we need to be doing. They need to be focusing on those things that are not going to impact our ability to grow and create jobs. So the difference is in the priorities. And I also believe very strongly that middle-class families have been the ones asked to sacrifice over and over and over again, whether it's wages or their house underwater or, trying to figure out how to pay the bills. And so whatever's done should not one more time be put on the backs of middle-class families. And so that's really what the fight's about. It's that if we have a huge deficit hole to get out of, but everybody ought to be participating, not just families who are sending their children to war, who are taking the brunt of the hits at home because of the economy. And so that's really what this fight is about. It's about priorities and values and choices.
All right, Senator, always great to talk with you. Thanks for checking in with us, and congratulations on the new air route.
Well, I'm excited about it for all of us in the community. You know, I've been in Lansing since I came down to Michigan State. I won't tell you what year because it makes me feel too old. But
that's all right, Senator.
It's exciting to see.
I remember covering you when you were with the Ingham County Board of Commissioners when I was a student at Michigan State. So, I'm not going to say when that one.
I was just out of college,
yep.
So I think we were both 5 years old at the time.
There you have it. I think that's exactly right. Thank you again, Senator.
Take care.
U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. Jonah, one of my first assignments when I think I was still going to school at Michigan State would be to cover the Ingham County Board of Commissioners for WKAR Radio, and Debbie Stabenow was actually the chairman. Well, after a little while she was. So I've known her. I'm not going to say for how long. All right, we're going to take a break. Nikki Hale, our world correspondent, will join us in just a moment. This is Michigan's Morning Show. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick Shields this morning. It's Firekeepers Friday, and we're live at the American Metal Roofs studio. And Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this Firekeepers Friday. We're live from the American Metal Roofs studio. Amanda K. Wall is at the Capital Region Airport this morning. Big day at the airport as service is inaugurated directly between our state capital and the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Good morning again, Amanda.
Good morning, Rich. I am here down at the Capital Region International Airport, and as you walk through the doors this morning, there is excitement everywhere. They have cutouts of past presidents. They have a great, really fast, quick check-through line with friendly faces behind the counter. You walk directly into the Sun Country Airlines booth, walk right up, and you can get right on the plane. It's very quick, very fast, very efficient, and you can make it to Washington, D.C. about 2 hours and 45 minutes earlier than you normally would have.
Have they got a seat? Have they got a seat for you this morning, Amanda? Because this is the last day that the cherry blossoms will be in bloom in D.C. So I think you ought to go.
I should go to D.C. I should just jump on the plane.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
I could do it, and I could actually make it there, have a little visit in D.C., and make it back to Lansing all in the same day because they have this service here.
Well, there you go. So a big day at the airport. We'll check in with you in a little bit. Right now we want to talk with the chairman, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Bud Selig, who is joining us. Good morning, Commissioner.
Yeah, well, thank you. I only wish.
It's April Fool's Day. We have Robert Selig, not Bud Selig. Robert Selig is the executive director of the Capital Region Airport Authority. This is quite a feather in your cap this morning, isn't it?
Well, it is another milestone. The region has been asking for a return of Washington, D.C., nonstop Washington, D.C. service, and so working with Sun Country, we made that happen. The best thing is it's low fare service too. So we've got the lowest fares to Washington, D.C. in the state.
How low would a low fare be?
Well, last time I checked, you could get a round trip to Washington, D.C. for $200.
Oh, well, somebody's got to tell Amanda. Is this first flight fully booked? The reason I'm asking, we got to get Amanda on this flight. This is the last day the cherry blossoms will be in bloom in D.C. So this is a great day to go.
I'm sure they'll find a seat for her if she really wants to go.
Outstanding. What does this mean to the airport and to the airport area?
Well, it's a continuing broadening of the Sun Country commitment to Michigan. We launched the Cancun and Florida and Las Vegas services earlier this year. This nonstop service to Washington, D.C. required us to get a landing slot at Reagan National Airport, and there's a whole lot of competition for that by other airlines. So Senator Stabenow and other executives in the community really went together and worked with Sun Country to get this slot. It's a really, that slot is worth gold. So we're very fortunate to have this service, and it's again, it's the thing that the region's been asking for a long time.
Prior to today, how would a passenger go about getting from Lansing to D.C.? Would you have to go to the airport in Grand Rapids or the airport in Detroit, or does Flint have a service?
No, you can fly right out of Lansing on Delta Airlines or United Airlines to get to D.C. and it's convenient too. It's just not nonstop. You have to stop in either Detroit or Chicago to get there. We provide service worldwide, so you never have to go to Detroit or Flint or Grand Rapids for service. This is your airport here.
Well, there you have it. All right, Robert, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it, and congratulations on the new line.
Thank you very much.
All right, Robert Seelig, the Executive Director of the Capital Region Airport Authority, who I somewhat rudely referred to as the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Bud Selig, instead of Robert Seelig. But I did it on purpose. Normally when I do that, it's a mistake. Nikki Hale's in studio, our world correspondent. Normally when I do it, it's a blunder. But see, it's April Fool's Day today.
Yes, that was a good one, actually.
Yeah, there you go. Not as good as the way we started the show this morning by talking about Michigan State's big victory in the NCAA basketball championship game last night against Ohio State.
It's kind of mean, isn't it?
A little. But, you know, there's a tinge of meanness, I suppose, to April Fool's Day itself. It's all in good fun, but nonetheless, you're trying to fool people, which is, by definition, a little bit mean.
Right, and I told my staff yesterday.
You have a staff?
I do.
My.
I know, and they're wonderful. I love them.
I don't know. I wish I had a staff.
I love them, and I told them today I was going to actually call in sick because I was so concerned. I could see them planning. I'm like, oh, please, it's nothing with bugs, you know? Whatever you're going to do, just don't put bugs in my office. But there's going to be something going on in my branch today, so... We'll see. We will see. Well, you have to tell us about that next week, one supposes. If I survive it, right?
What about the history of April Fool's Day? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. April Fool's started back in 1582 in France because back in the day, New Year's Day used to be March 25th through April 1st is when they celebrated that. And then when they changed that from that calendar over to December 31st to January 1st, you know, they didn't have email or cell phones. It took a long time for the population of all other countries and around the world to understand that date had changed. And so when they didn't know and they were still celebrating March 25th to April 1st, they were like, oh, you fool.
Oh, I see.
So that's where that term comes from. And then it evolved into people pranking them and trying to make people believe that, oh, it hadn't changed, and trying to fool you know, the commoners into thinking that, no, you can still celebrate on April 1st, go ahead, you know. And so this whole pranking thing came along and evolved from that. So it's actually got a historical meaning. Who knew, huh?
There we go. Yes. Well, everything does at some point. It's just interesting to find out, what it was.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
What, we have any sort of rank of, you know, all-time April Fool's jokes that have gone awry, anything like that?
I don't know. I know that I did pull a nasty prank on one of my employees 2 years ago. He wanted to prank my staff, and I told him I was going along with it. And then I told all my staff what he was doing, and we pranked him. He was not happy about that.
I'll tell you my favorite one. I was working for an operation called Sports Phone in Detroit. This was that was a long time ago. Back in the early 1980s, as a matter of fact, and we called the Chicago Bureau and told them that Woody Hayes had resigned as the head football coach at Ohio State and was being replaced by Bo Schembechler, and Hayes was coming to Michigan, and they ran with it. And before you know it, it was on Chicago radio stations.
No way.
And the stations in Chicago were calling they were calling WJR in Detroit to find out if it was true or not, so it makes it on the air there. And it was so absurd on its face, you know, anybody's going to see that this is clearly. I almost lost my job. I mean, that would be the unfunny part of it. But my goodness gracious, to have something that outlandish and to do it on April 1st and then have somebody go with it.
No kidding.
Oh my goodness.
No kidding.
We kind of thought it was kind of a cute, you know, little prank to play other people.
You didn't think it was going to snowball to that effect.
No, exactly not. Not to the point where...
have to be careful, I guess. Sometimes
not to the point where we're having a meeting deciding whether or not my employment will be continued with this particular organization. We didn't expect to see that, but
a little more than a wrist slap on that occasion.
J.P. McCarthy was actually talking with a sportscaster in Chicago, trying to, you know, assure him that no, in fact, this was just a joke being played by these young reporters over here at this little sports phone operation, and it, I mean, my goodness, it made quite the splash, but not necessarily in a good way.
No.
But we're like, how can you, you know, how can you not see that that's,
Well,
a joke.
obviously the person that you first
Yes.
approached was very taken by that.
Well, there you
and
go.
Thought, oh my gosh,
That's
I'm gonna
a
run
huge.
with it.
That's a huge story.
Yes, I know. I know. Yesterday I was at a networking event, and somebody had told a young lady that Ashton Kutcher was coming into Lansing via the Lansing airport, and she fully believed it. And she was telling everybody at this networking, and we're like, "No, honey, really, they were joking with you." And she's like, "Oh."
Yes, I've sort of been on the periphery of this story, but the missing cobra in the Bronx has been found.
Yes.
Without the need to bring in a mongoose to defeat the cobra.
Yeah, apparently it was actually still in the enclosure where the snakes are kept. Just they couldn't find it, and I guess they were a little concerned. It's a very small cobra. It's I guess a teenager still.
I see.
So it wasn't easy to find, and apparently if they don't feel well, or if they feel insecure, they'll go and they'll tighten up into a very tiny ball and hide in a very small place. So, and it's not something that you can go putting your hand in, is it really, into
I shouldn't
holes
think.
looking for a cobra. You don't want to get bitten. So,
yeah.
But luckily they found it.
Was there widespread panic in New York as a result of this?
Well, no.
Or
The funny
I guess
thing,
you'd be a little uneasy thinking there's a cobra, perhaps.
Yeah,
who knows where in the city?
and it hit Twitter, and I guess there's a person pretending to be the cobra, and there's like 300,000 followers, and they're making funny remarks, political remarks. So, the story evolved, and I guess it was kind of cute because, when they lose an animal at the zoo, I mean, it's sort of like, okay, what kind of control have you got going on over there?
What if the finding of the cobra is just an April Fool's joke?
True.
I'm going to take a break. We'll have more with Nikki Hale, our world correspondent, in a moment. You are listening to Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields. We're live at the American Metal Roofs studio on Firekeepers Friday. And Richard Kincaid for Michael Patrick on this Friday. Nikki Hale, our world correspondent, is in studio with us. Normally, Ronald Van Timmerman would be joining us from Celebration Cinemas. That's always one of my favorite sites on I-96 when I pass the bright neon of the Celebration Cinema because I know I'm almost to the hotel. I'm almost home, or my home away from home when I'm up here to do the show. But seen any good movies lately?
You know what? Actually, I haven't been to the movie
You're
theater.
pretty busy, huh?
I am,
Yes.
and I try to go to the theater. I really always, and if I don't catch it, I'll get it on DVD. So I missed Red. Did you see Red?
No.
I missed that at the theater, but I bought that on DVD, and I know the critics were kind of icky on that one. I liked it. I thought it was hilarious. It was Bruce Willis and Helen Mirren and tons of big actors, and I thought it was a great spoof on an action movie. It was pretty interesting. So.
I don't know about the cable system here. I don't know if you get Channel 9, the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company affiliate in Windsor across the river from Detroit. But we get it on my cable system. And I'm interested to see the ramp-up of the coverage of the royal wedding has begun.
Yes.
And, Canada, until 1964, I think, was the Dominion of Canada. It was still part of the British Empire. They actually, I've been to the Winnipeg Arena, for example, where there's a massive portrait of the Queen hung at one end of the arena where the home team shoots 2 periods.
Yeah, and I think even though they're really not officially part of it anymore,
Right.
they
It's
still
a big deal.
still feel it's very traditional to them.
Yeah.
So I believe William and Kate are their first official visit after the wedding will be Canada.
Oh, there you go.
So that's
We'll
how.
go to a Leafs game.
Yeah, there you. Oh, that would be fantastic. Wouldn't
Actually, there are pictures. Well, there were pictures. Maple Leaf Gardens, it's still there, but it's not being used anymore. But one of the biggest pictures in the arena, and their hallways, their corridors are lined with great moments in Maple Leaf history. But one of the largest is the Queen. She actually went to a Maple Leafs game in the early 1950s, and there's a picture of her shaking hands with Teeter Kennedy, who was a captain of the Maple Leafs at the time. So they take it pretty seriously over there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
On Sunday night they showed The Queen, that movie about what happened after Princess Diana died with the rest of the royal family, and it was filled with promotional,
Yes.
things for the upcoming wedding. And I understand the bachelor party was last Saturday night.
Yes, because Harry is now on an expedition out in the North Pole, isn't he? Trying to raise money for charity for soldiers that are wounded at war. So he's out trekking in minus 40 degrees at the moment.
Who are you going to hit up for money in a place where it's 40 degrees below?
Well, I think they're doing that, and they're getting sponsored to do
I see.
it. So
Okay.
they're not actually looking for people or polar bears, I suppose.
Yeah. So now when is the wedding? How close are we here?
It's April 28th, I believe, is
Oh,
the
wow.
date. So
Yeah.
we're very close. Yeah, less than a month away.
How long is the whole thing going to take?
I wouldn't think it would be more than 2 hours or anything like that.
I mean, how will it rival, say, a coronation? Because I think a coronation takes 5 or 6 hours.
That's lengthy. Yeah. Well, the wedding in all is going to be a full day. I mean, but what we're going to see on television is going to be a very small portion of that, because we're only going to actually get to see her arriving in her car, which won't be the carriage. She's decided to do a car, and then.
Oh, did they know?
Okay. Yeah. She's actually changing quite a lot of the tradition from the wedding that we saw with Diana. Kate's putting her own twist on it.
Okay.
I think for several reasons. More because they're modern and they don't see the need for all of the extra excess, and also I think from an economic standpoint, I think they're trying to not be too flattering of look how much money we have when there's a country that's struggling. I mean, the UK is in pretty much the same situation that the US is in. We're still trying to come out of that economic turndown.
Except what they have 500,000 people turn out in London to protest last week.
Yeah, it was
huge.
It's pretty scary, yes.
Yeah.
And it was a peaceful protest, except for the people that segmented off and did the looting, which we talked about last week.
Yeah.
So.
We were talking about it earlier this morning with Gary Austin that radiation is being detected all over the world as a result of the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster in Japan. There's actually been some radiation earlier this week recorded here in Lansing, not anywhere near what it would take to cause anyone harm, but you note that it's being picked up in Glasgow, so it's almost all the way around the world now.
Yep, exactly.
It's like 3/4 of the way around the world.
Yep, and what they're trying to see is they're trying to see if this stuff is spreading, which they find out it is. It's not harmful to the public, though. I mean, they're detecting radiation miles up in the sky. It's not necessarily on the ground. Will this finally settle? It may, but is it going to cause harm? We don't know yet. We don't know. Japan was reporting that they don't know what's happening with the actual water that they actually were using to cool down the nuclear power plants. That water was seeping into the ground. Where is that going? That's the main concern at the moment. And then once that's in the mainstream, is that going to the ocean? Where does that go? So how do they track that? I mean, this is a huge problem, and I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg at this point.
Yeah,
and I think they're seeing. I think the concern is if we're already seeing radiation leaking across the world, what's it going to be after when we find out what's coming into the water?
Exactly, and it's you hear so many varying numbers about, for example, the water beneath the reactor is 10,000 times above the limit, and other people say no, it's 100,000 times what it's supposed to be. It's very difficult to get the basic facts on this story, and really, I think all you can do at this point, well, you can take the word of the International Atomic Energy Commission, which said that they should evacuate 25 miles around that plant, which is about twice as far as the evacuation zone is currently set at. So something certainly that we'll keep watching.
And difficult for the folks because they don't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Nikki, thanks for dropping by.
Hey, you're very welcome. It's nice to see you, Rich.
All right, good to see you, Nikki. Nikki Hale, our world correspondent. We will take a break and be back with more here on Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields. It's Firekeepers Friday. We're live from the American Metal Roof Studio. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick this morning. We're at the American Metal Roofs studio on this Firekeepers Friday. 1 week from today, it'll be opening day for the Detroit Tigers, their home opener at any rate. The season opener was yesterday, the first time ever the Tigers have played a regular season game in the month of March. Didn't turn out well. The Yankees beat the Tigers, as you no doubt know by now, 6-3 the final score. An interesting note, the last 11 times now, that the Yankees have played their season opener at home, they've won. They have not lost their regular season opener when they began the season at Yankee Stadium since way back in 1982. Mark Teixeira with a 3-run home run in the third inning off of Tigers starter Justin Verlander, who worked 6 solid innings, struck out 8, looked pretty good out there, except for that one mistake to Teixeira. The Tigers had the game tied at 3 when Verlander left after 6. His replacement, Phil Koch, facing the first batter he's faced all year long, former Tiger Curtis Granderson. In fact, one of the players that came to Detroit in the deal which sent Granderson to New York, and Curtis hit the ball out. His solo home run giving the Yankees a lead they would not relinquish. 6-3 turned out to be the final score. The Yankees beating the Tigers yesterday. Granderson made a great catch in the first inning, running in to dive and to catch a line drive. He made a great catch in the 9th inning, catching a ball over his shoulder on the warning track. So he pretty much had an all-round sort of day. Interesting because there was a lot of talk that Granderson might not be ready for opening day. He strained an oblique muscle, actually stayed in Florida a couple of extra days, played in a minor league game, then flew to New York in time for the game yesterday. where, again, because of the injury, they weren't sure he'd be ready to play. But I'll tell you what, he looked pretty healthy to Yankees manager Joe Girardi.
Yes, he did. There was obviously questions on Tuesday how it was going to turn out, but he looked great today. Outstanding defense, big home run in the bottom of the seventh. I mean, he has been a different player for us the last 3 months of last year, including the playoffs, and he looks great.
All right, he did. Tigers lose it 6-3. An off day for the Tigers and the Yankees today, which may be a good thing with a storm bearing down on the northeast. I'm not sure how much of that snow will hit the New York area, but they're talking about a significant, measurable foot of snow in some areas in New York and in New England. No game for the Tigers and Yankees today. They will resume their weekend series tomorrow afternoon at Yankee Stadium. The other baseball finals on opening day yesterday, it was Los Angeles over Kansas City 4-2. Those are the only two games in the American League. Over in the National League, Atlanta beat Washington at 2-0. It was Cincinnati scoring 4 in the bottom of the ninth to beat Milwaukee 7-6. The first two Milwaukee batters of the season hit home runs in that game yesterday, but they still came out losing. Former Tiger Cameron Maybin hit a 2-out ninth-inning home run to tie the ball game, then got the game-winning hit in the 11th as San Diego won at St. Louis 5-3. And Don Mattingly, Donnie Ballgame, his first victory as a manager as his Dodgers knocked off the San Francisco Giants last night 2-1. It was 43 degrees at game time in New York yesterday. It was 85 degrees at game time last night in Los Angeles. Amanda K. Wall, our producer, out at the Capital Region Airport. The big day, the first direct flights from Lansing to Washington, D.C., and I imagine they're getting ready to get on the planes right now, Amanda.
They're actually, everybody is filing into the airport. There are a lot of smiles. I saw a few kids getting very excited. They're heading on spring break, they said. They get to go to Washington, D.C. for their spring break. What a neat place to go. And then I'm here right now with a very prominent member of the business community, Paula Cunningham. She's the president, CEO of the Capital National Bank, and a board member of the Mid-Michigan Travel Coalition. Good morning, Paula.
Good morning, Amanda.
And what are you excited most about this flight?
Oh, I'm just excited that Lansing has been successful in landing this flight here. I mean, to have that direct service, this is the envy of every other community throughout the country. You don't get the direct service on Sun Country the way that we have been able to receive that today. So it's exciting to know that we are winning these types of attractions for this community.
Do you think this will be something that the business community will use as a daily thing? Do you think people will be flying there for meetings during the day and coming right back?
I think that's part of the reason that we were able to be successful in getting Sun Country here in this particular flight is because the business community rallied behind this initiative, and they actually wrote letters. They contacted Senator Stabenow and Levin and all of their representatives in Washington because they need this service. I mean, the associations, Michigan State University, the entire business community uses this flight all the time, and to have direct service, the real critical piece here is to keep that service and make sure we continue to use it.
Well, it sounds like with the kids traveling, the business community, the politicians, that this is going to be a very, very positive impact on the Lansing area, on Mid-Michigan. And we are actually going to have Senator Levin coming on in the next segment. Rich, we're going to throw it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Paula. The latest at the airport on a very exciting day today at the Capital Region Airport. The flights from Lansing to Washington, D.C. get underway today. And as Amanda mentioned, U.S. Senator Carl Levin joins us in the next hour. And we'll also hear from some guy, Michael Patrick Shields, whoever he is going to check in with us from the Golf Correspondents Annual Outing. So we'll maybe talk a little Masters Golf. All right, that's just a week away as well. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on Michigan's Morning Show. We're coming to you live from the American Metal Roofs studio. Thanks to everybody on our TV side, and stick around on the radio side. We'll be back with you, well, directly.